Hi, welcome. This is continuing the reading of Walking a Rainbow by me, Michael Shearer, about walking the Camino de Santiago with my son Kez, who was 9 at the time. This reading is chapter 27, which is called How to Change Your Mind. This was massive country, bleak and rugged, immense curves gashed with valleys. The landscape felt broken, as a horse might be broken in spirit. Entire villages were increasingly decrepit, run down, even literally falling down, abandoned. We walked on, alone, into the stagnant silence of the burnished afternoon. Kez suggested playing a game of inventing proverbs. Mine were pompous things in pseudo-Confucian style. The only one I recall is, "It is instructive for a man of method to stumble on a petal." Kez's offerings were more down to earth, like red sky at night, barns on fire. We had trouble finding decent shade. Eventually we cleared a space in a scrappy bit of oak scrub. Not a good spot, but we were tired. "Are there any dangerous animals around here?" "No, I don't think so, Kez. There's wolves further west," I said, sitting down and unpacking the stove. "Wolves?" "Don't worry. People have gone out deliberately looking for them for weeks, found nothing but droppings." "Any bears?" said Kez nervously. "No, certainly not." "This looks like the sort of place that could have bears." "No bears, Kez." "Ah!" I leapt up. Shit! Ah! What is it? What is it?" Cleggies, get out of here, Kez. Get out. Don't stop, scram." Kez quit fast, ran into the open heather and stood wide-eyed as I scrabbled about collecting gear, rushing out and dumping it by his feet, belting back for more. Eventually we sat once more in the attenuated shade of a tall tree whose shadow reached to the golden, wiry grass of safe, open space. "What's Cleggies? I couldn't see anything." "Horseflies. Lethal bastards. Fly silent and bite you right through your clothes. Nasty bites. Damn things attack me in droves. That patch is full of them. You get bitten?" "No." "Must be your socks. If you could put your socks in a bottle, you'd make a fortune." We had trouble getting started again. This place induced a restless lethargy. The same energy which was crumbling the villages was sapping our strength. Things slowed here, and something else got to work. It occurred to me that my irritation with Ebi was somewhat excessive, a bit irrational. She wasn't that bad, yet I had been seething. The way here fueled a simmering discontent. On the road, a tall, upright, vigorous-looking man in his 60s shuffled along, barely moving. He swayed along with blank eyes and a beaming face. "What's he on?" asked Kez. "Mountains," I replied. In the warm, late afternoon, the sun glared with a rusty, manted eye in a bruised violet sky. It had a predatory presence, like mosquitoes or a mesmerizing snake awaiting its chance. According to the map, there was a Mina Roma, a Roman mine, in the mountains to our right, only 700 metres off the route, but we were too tired to bother. We reached the next village, Rabanal, by early evening. Even as we approached, it was obvious that this place was different, very different. Just another in the sequence of run-down villages by the look of it, but its feel was exceedingly odd and nothing like any of the others. At first I merely felt uneasy. Then the vulnerable sense of being watched. Then a whiff of paranoia, a sense of slippage. Of course, I'm stepping over a gully in the middle of this dirt street. But it looks like a miniature landscape, a rivulet, tiny waterfalls trickling over white rocks, grass on its banks. These silent houses looking on are not places to live in. They feel commemorative, like inscriptions or inscrutable warnings. It's very odd to look at a door, see plainly that it is undoubtedly a door, and to know that the term door is wrong. This whole place felt like that. It was profoundly not what it seemed. There was an experience of confrontation without knowing what it was that was being confronted. A face-to-face encounter with something completely other. Something organised on different principles. We toiled up its main street, scarcely more than an alleyway, with a stream, which served as a sewer, snaking down its centre. The ramshackle streets were empty of people, but full of this sense of displacement. Imagine a small toy truck with a real twig as its load. The twig looks like a massive log seen on the scale of the model, and it looks like something made, fashioned, as the truck is. But it's natural and just this little twig. The mind becomes indecisive, doesn't know what to make of it. Rabanal was imbued with this feel of the ambiguous. A toy, a model, a facade. I scanned the few side streets nervously. It was an error to assume that a house was in the same category as the one next to it. It felt as if we were straying into territory which required special knowledge, which we did not have, like walking uninvited and unexpectedly through a deserted nuclear power station, not knowing what it was. We were trespassers here, ignorant of its functioning, incompetent. It made me feel restless, a stranger in someone else's world. By the time we had reached its earthen central space, splattered with cowpats and goat dung, the feeling was overwhelming. It was as if I'd wandered into a film set. The ordinary world was somewhere else. This place was old, medieval, no, older, so old it needed to be conceived otherwise. It was like walking into a prehistoric settlement where everything was ordinary yet had some function that couldn't be fathomed. Was this a well or a sanctuary? Was that a shepherd or a priest? Were all these concepts mistaken? I didn't belong here. It reeked of a pagan way of life. It had structures of thought and feeling which clashed with the way my mind worked. I felt radically challenged. There was a sense of emotional dissonance. I looked around and everything was peaceful and unremarkable, yet I had no idea what I was looking at. "What do you make of this place?" I asked Kes as we approached a fountain. "It ought to be a ghost town, but it's not," replied Kes. A few locals wandered around like extras or spies. I asked a surly young man for the refuge, and he waved at a derelict building nearby. We dumped the bags by the fountain and took a look. The refuge was a 2-storied, disused schoolhouse, originally whitewashed, but so many patches had flaked away that it looked like mould on rotting flesh. It was in a state of advanced decay. It wasn't so much falling down as decomposing. The ground had risen around it, so it was in a shallow basin, as if sunk into the soil. We walked around the building and descended to the entrance. By the doorway was an external staircase with scarcely any stairs. It led up to a wooden balcony with no floor that looked as if it was going to fall off the building at any moment. It was precariously held up by 2 dangerously eroded primitive classical columns. Inside, through the doorway, we were greeted by a scene of invasion. Nature was in process of taking back this building into itself. Humanity was being overruled. It was damp and smelt earthy. There was no ceiling. The upper floor was missing, only skeletal, fractured rafters high up in the roof. Most of the floorboards beneath our feet had rotted away, leaving mouldy and splintered remains. The struts for the floor, the joists, were mostly intact, showing bare ground between. More like a cave than a building. It was dissolving back into the land. The room had the fluid, transitional feel of a rotting tree trunk, of life beneath the stone, a place of moss and woodlice and fungi. Here, unknown creatures might plant spore, stanchions might crumble with dry rot. Beetles and roaches ruled, and a man needed antennae and the alien ruby eyes of a moth to see it aright. We fetched our gear. The ground was too filthy for the rucksacks, so we put them on what was left of the windowsill. They hung there like cocoons amid the spiders' webs and cobwebs. Another pilgrim arrived wearing a T-shirt with "Anyone can have an idea" printed on it in English. She looked around in silent disbelief, shaking her head, and went away to try and find somewhere else. No one in their right mind would sleep here. "Are we really going to stay here, Dad?" "Yep." "We'll wake up as zombies." I knew what he meant. A place for metamorphosis, for subversive change. Lower your guard and it would seep in and reformulate everything, as a maggot might become a fly. Here categories were confused, boundaries breached. Even the distinctions between the artificial and natural, inside and outside, were unclear. It was getting dark. I found a thick church candle covered in dust in a corner, brushed it down and lit it. It multiplied flickering other-world shadows around the room. I felt excessively tired. Sleep kept creeping over me like a drug as I brewed up some tea. "There's creepy crawlies wherever you look," said Kes, brushing beetles away from enough earth to put his mug down. "Nothing that bites, that I can see. No mosquitoes, no cleggies." "Do you think there's mice?" "Probably." "Rats?" maybe. But if there is, they won't bother us. They'll try for the food in the rucksacks on the other side of the room. But I don't think they would get anything. I'll strap the bags up tight. Don't worry, we'll be all right. We spread our sleeping bags on the bare earth between the struts and laid down as if in shallow graves. Good night, Dad. Good night, Kez. The last thing I saw as I blew out the candle was a large spider a couple of inches from my face, scurrying into the shadows. I was woken by music. It was still quite dark, but there was a faint light, whether moonlight or the onset of dawn, I wasn't sure. The room was grey and shapeless. The music was weird. A single drum and castanets beat in an unmatching, lopsided rhythm that continually altered. It grew close and moved away. People outside were walking through the streets playing eerie music in the middle of the night. It wasn't revellers. There were no voices, just this haunting, formless dirge, sounding like the last pair of a defeated army in retreat. I heard bells and fireworks, then utter quiet. I lay awake for some time amid the murky, unidentifiable, grey shapes of the room. Then more music started up, not moving, but steady. It sounded as if it was right outside, as if local people were playing strange music just for us. Some wind instrument now, maybe a recorder or a flute, and a single drum. I listened carefully. It went nowhere. It went on and on without pattern. It just unfurled, lonely, out of the dark silence. You got caught in it like a web. It felt uncanny. My temples tingled. Most music eventually reassures. It embodies the archetype of the journey. Establishing a home at first, a security which allows a wandering away. There is variation and development, expressing the need to get away without the total vagrancy of the dispossessed. Then it makes its way back, returns home to experience the familiar anew. This music of Rabanal was not of that kind. It started arbitrarily, established no secure base, then it wandered on with no discernible pattern. You never knew where you were. It led you up the garden path, up a creek without a paddle, into a musical void. Here the mind could find no order, no melody, no repetition, no bounded concepts. It was untethered and disconcerting. Although it lacked pattern, it wasn't a free-form mess, but hearkened towards form without finding it. It was haunting, creepy, the music of ghosts and the eerie, the music of lost souls, of minds between places, between concepts, with nowhere to go, stripped of location, direction, dimension, bereft of reference. The very air wavered with silent appeals and mute calls of the utterly exiled. My half-asleep mind followed, lured out of itself, fascinated. It was cold in the early morning when I awoke. Kez was still fast asleep. I went for a walk. The air had a mountain's chill. It was dewy and pristine. A pretty young girl in a simple one-piece black dress and no shoes drew water from the well. I smiled, and she turned away shyly. A cart drawn by oxen laboured slowly past. It was quite biblical. Rabanal still felt like another world, but I was no longer estranged. I had been touched by it. I sat on the low, mossy wall surrounding the fountain and lit a cigarette, feeling rested and at home. A quiet consummation. I'd been recognised, as if greeted by locusts. It was obvious that here was another of the special places of the way, one of the markers, a place which allowed a stage to be traversed. The feel of Rabanal is quite unlike anywhere else on the Camino. Indeed, it is quite unlike anywhere else I know. It feels ancient, as old as rock. Its world is different, stranger, more intimate. Rabanal is akin to the mountains, spawned by them, serving as a gatehouse or a portal. It is a place where the rules change. There are secrets here. It is a place for breaking, a place for dissolution. The mind's cohesion is loosened. Rabanal is Dionysian. Dionysus is the god of dismemberment. To create anew, the old order must be broken. Rabanal takes apart the sense of the safe. It unthreads composition. Here the mind is in quicklime. Since Orbigo, I've been feeling increasingly agitated, irritated, unsettled. By Santa Catalina it had ripened into anger, a sense of threat. I had blamed it on Ebi, but now it seemed clear that was an oversimplification. To some extent, I've been anticipating the presence of Rabanal. Enter in anger, go in peace. A young woman approached, smiling across the green. Her whole manner was welcoming. To look in her eyes was to make gentle contact, like a familiar squeeze of the hand. She introduced herself. Barbara, an anthropologist from Zurich, here to study the Camino, and especially Rabanal. She wanted a chat, to ask a few questions. It would help her research. "Why are you walking the way?" she began. "Well, that's not so easy to answer. I think I'm trying to let the Camino tell me." "And does it?" "Well, yes, gradually, in bits, as much as I can take. But I'm too stupid much of the time, too fearful, too insensitive, not worthy." "What do you mean?" she said in an encouraging tone. "Well, I resist. It's working. The Camino is very special. It's a symbolic thing. It works symbolically. Symbols are real." "Yes, it is very special. I've walked the way myself, but some places are more important than others." "Yes, I've found it so. Which places have you found especially important?" I didn't want to answer this. I wanted to find out if my own experiences had been confirmed by others. I countered with a question. "Have you interviewed many people?" "Oh yes, hundreds." "And what do they say are the important places?" "Well, the ordinary pilgrims who are here for the holiday or the sport. They talk of the big towns." "No, they are irrelevant." That's what the proper pilgrims like yourself say. The real pilgrims speak of Puente la Reina and San Juan. That's right, I said, grinning. Unate, near Puente, San Juan, and of course here at Rabanal. Oh yes, this is one of the secret places. What do the proper pilgrims say about Rabanal? Oh, it isn't just Rabanal. She waved her arm towards the hills as she continued. Many find the mountains here a place of tension. It is a place for rows and argument. Groups quarrel and break up. I found it a place for anger, I replied ruefully. She smiled. Storms are frequent here. What else? She said, encouraging. The anger is an energy of transformation, I think. Does that sound pompous? Oh no, it is close to what many people say, though they more often speak of it in a negative way. They talk of a sense of death here, and impermanence, and of being transported back in time. I've found that too. How can you live here and study here? Oh, there are many scholars here, not just me. The English are going to open a refuge, which will also be a place of study. She consulted her watch. I'm afraid I must go now. I have an appointment. She bestowed a smile of kinship and left. I was immensely pleased with this little conversation. It was a confirmation. The Camino had convinced me incrementally that the notion of simple subjectivity was wrong. A person is a sensitive instrument in a given location. Once the debris of town life is walked off, the pilgrim is as much a recorder of the felt quality of place as a thermometer. The way is a training in the empathetic skill, a negative capability which is open to such change. There is something deeply disruptive and disturbing on the road to Rabanal, and Rabanal is its epicenter. A peak of disorientation focuses on this village. I know it. It isn't just personal response. Rabanal is one of the special places on the Camino. It resonates with Unate and San Juan, across space, across time. 3 found, 2 to go. Everyone has an intricate internal structure of concepts, propositions and theories. This structure is what we currently think we know and believe. It's what we are. When we encounter some new material, we process it using this intellectual structure. If we can do that, then we can say we understand this new matter. Sometimes we don't understand. Then we need to tinker with our comprehending structures. This may require a bit of study, research, questioning, so that we can add some extension to our capacity to understand. Sometimes we have to demolish a part of what we know and rebuild to accommodate the new. Sometimes what we have to understand cannot be fitted into ourselves without transformation. The old structure is dissolved to enable a new self to form. This is what Rabanal does. The secret places on the Camino are way stations that prepare and effect these changes. They must be experienced in the right order. Each must have its effect before the pilgrim is ready for the next. It would not do to tackle Rabanal unprepared by Unate and San Juan. The time gaps between enable the preparatory consolidation ready for the next. This is why the way has to be walked. The walker's natural pace is needed. The tall man in his 60s that we had seen shuffling along the road to Rubber Knoll came limping across the square. He was obviously in pain, yet his face was still blissed out. I asked him what the problem was with his legs, and he told me that he had strained many muscles. I offered him an ankle pill, which he refused, saying that he didn't need help as God would provide. I flared up with annoyance. How did he expect God to provide? Send an archangel? God had provided, sending me with an ankle pill. Silly sod. He benevolently gazed upon me with forgiving pity and went on his rapturous way. Kes was stirring in the refuge. Sleep well? Like the dead. Didn't you hear the music? What music? There was weird music. I had a troubled night. Mine was a bit troubled at first. Really? How were you troubled? Kept dreaming of steak and kidney pie and chips. Pie and chips? Yeah, covered in salad cream. No Tabasco? No. We got ready to walk on.